The Congolese Giant Spider, the J'ba Fofi. Original research and writing by Rukania, with further edits by The Facts and Fiction. Night drive footage generously provided by Jade Widow Drives. Note, while I was unable to personally verify the authenticity of Douglas Arnett or his grandson Joshua, I believe this story, or account, depending on who you may ask, serves as an excellent entry point to a topic I think we'll be covering in future drives together. That is to say, the alleged encounters with unrecognized creatures of nightmare, more commonly known as cryptids, throughout the world. Now, let's get into the story. Please note this is a non-fictional work and contains accounts from real people. Graphic descriptions and scenes are also described. Reader discretion is advised. Tarantulas, Theraphosidae, can be found on nearly every continent in the world, dating back 16 million years and including over 1,000 unique species as of December 2023. Tarantulas have a well-documented presence worldwide. Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, is similarly one of the most common fears worldwide, and many attribute their arachnophobia to the tarantula specifically. Tarantulas are the largest arachnids known to science, and their distinctively large, hairy body, in conjunction with a large set of fangs, can cause many to sweat. The largest spider in the world is considered to be the Goliath bird eater, which can reach some 11 inches, 30 centimeters in length. This tarantula resides predominantly in Oceania, and it has a diet of insects, lizards, small mammals, and, as the name might suggest, even birds. The following account, however, may suggest the existence of a much larger spider in the rainforests of Africa. The Congolese Giant Spider, known by locals as the J'ba Fofi. Douglas Arnett was a Scottish mapmaker for the Ordnance Survey from 1962 to 1991. His job took him all around the world, yet he would conduct most of his notable work in Africa. He would document and map much of Ghana, the Seychelles, Senegal, and the Congo. Douglas mapped the cities and surrounding jungle of Jambala, Ewo, and Gambomba throughout most of the 1970s. During this time, he also met Joseph Kasongo, a local hunter from a village just outside the town of Sibiti. He would aid Arnett in his expeditions into the jungle. Over a period of 5 years, Arnett and Kasongo would traverse the 342,000 square kilometers the Congo had to offer, documenting roads, forests, and settlements for the Ordnance Survey. Kasongo's aid was invaluable in helping arrange accommodation with the locals in the various villages in which they found themselves during their survey work. In September 1978, Arnett and Kasongo found themselves in the village of Dakar. Arnett describes it as quite small, writing, "It has no more than 50 or 60 inhabitants. They live primitively, far stretch from London, certainly. The people speak limited English, yet have offered me a warming kindness, also a far stretch from London." It is important also to note here the location of Dakar. Dakar is located in the heart of the Congolian rainforest, the second largest in the world, and it falls directly on the equator. Not only does this increase the temperature, but some theorize the rainforest itself may provide some of the highest localized oxygen levels in the world. Arnett would not know this at the time, but these factors may well have contributed to his upcoming encounter. Continuing his account of Dakar, Arnett writes, "Joseph and I have been graciously hosted by Ms. Veronique Kyungu. Veronique's home is modest, boasting dirt floors and only 2 rooms. Yet her hospitality has more than made up for any lack of luxury. Veronique is a widow and has 2 children who are seldom home. Yet I have tried my hand at cuddling with her youngest child, baby Albert. Arnett continues his entry, describing the surrounding forest, humidity, and other animals he'd encountered. He describes snakes, birds, and lizards, all much larger than in the more populated areas he was used to. But amongst his descriptions, one entry, on September 30th, 1978, is strikingly foreboding. A young lad from the village returned from the river in hysterics today. He cried to his mother and surrounding villagers of J'ba Fofi. Rather than console the boy, the villagers began to pray. To my surprise, Joseph also began to pray. I asked him, and Joseph mentions this is J'ba Fofi territory, and many of the locals supported him in this. They are claiming of tarantulas that exceed the length of an arm, I assume 2 or 3 feet. While I thought Joseph to be a fellow man of science, I suppose I shouldn't ridicule him. If a spider of this magnitude existed, I would probably pray too. Joshua Arnett, the grandson of Douglas, recounts conversations he had with his grandfather about this moment. At the time, Douglas didn't include further details on the subject, at least not in his official journals, out of fear of ridicule from his colleagues. But he said he began to feel a sense of dread in the village. Douglas also recounts that Joseph was concerned that a J'ba Fofi sighting this close to the village implied a new nest must have been made in prior months. In fact, he recalled Veronique herself telling him that J'ba Fofi have killed dogs and cats before, even children. She even went as far as to say, they are the spawn of the devil. Joshua highlights the grave tone in which his grandfather told him this, taking his grandfather's stoic demeanor and mannerisms to indicate these statements were entirely truthful, at least in his grandfather's eyes. Arnett's next entry is the first believed documentation of J'ba Fofi, yet he was potentially still in denial at the time. 2nd October. Upon mine and Joseph's latest hike in the surrounding jungle to the Mobonanga River, we saw the largest king baboon spider I'd ever seen. We had king baboons reach 6 or 7 inches before, but this must have been at least 10 to 12 inches. I noticed it in a tree, almost watching us until it scurried off into the undergrowth. Some theorize this was just a large king baboon spider. Others believe it was an infant J'ba Fofi, with some even suggesting Arnett understated the size due to his shock and disbelief. This, however, we will never know. The next entry is by far the most unnerving. Reader discretion is advised as Arnett describes the gruesome events that allegedly took place one night in the village on the 5th of October, 1978. Joseph and I have had to leave the village of Dakar. In fact, I will be taking a leave of absence from mapping the Congo for a while. I am writing this entry 2 days after the fact and still struggle to put into words what I saw. I will attempt to, yet I do not know if I will ever show this writing to anyone. We were all sleeping at Veronique's. Joseph and I slept on hammocks in the living area, Veronique on a small bed in the cooking area, and the 3 children in their own room adjacent to us. I awoke at perhaps 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. The jungle was alive with noise as usual. That was not what awoke me, however. I heard a small whimpering come from the children's room. These children had been neither seen nor heard for the majority of our stay, so I could sense something unusual. I decided to investigate. There are no doors, only beads in the doorways, so I arose from my hammock and proceeded to their room to check if they were fine. I brushed past the beads, and neither of the older children were in their shared bed. I heard the whimpering again, from by my feet this time, and looked to see them curled up by the wall just below me. They had a haunting expression on their faces, tears streaming down their cheeks, and their eyes fixated across the room. It took me a moment for my eyes to adjust, and I wish they never had. I followed the children's stairs to Baby Albert's cot. Baby Albert's cot by the open window. The moonlight struck through the window to illuminate one of the most horrific sights of my life. A spider. It was at least 3 feet in length, potentially 4. Its brown hairs resembled a matted dog's coat, and its large fangs were probably 6 inches long. The fangs that were sunk into Albert. In hindsight, I can assume some sort of paralyzing venom is the reason Albert did not scream, or perhaps the spider had already gorged itself on poor Albert before I had arrived. My fear froze me for some seconds, though these seconds felt like a lifetime, before I gathered the courage to charge the spider. To my horror, instead of scuttling off like any other spider, this monster raised both its 2 front legs at me in a show of dominance, almost. I fell back and watched as it stood over Albert's body, dwarfing him now with its legs raised above his torso. The spider then decided to leave, crawling back through the open window I assumed that it came in from. I feel as if I do not need to describe Veronique's screams when we woke her. They will haunt me forever, as will the J'ba Fofi. Douglas Arnett would never return to the Congo after this, spending the rest of his career in Canada. He would also never submit these journals to the Ordnance Survey, and wouldn't so much as mention the J'ba Fofi until decades after the fact. Douglas passed away in 2019, but not before leaving his journals to his grandson, Joshua. Joshua would not read these journals thoroughly until 2 years later, 2021, then making it his goal to prove what his grandfather had seen all those years before. In 2022, Joshua and a team from Midlothian Science and Zoology would visit Dakar in hopes of confirming the story with Veronique. Unfortunately, Veronique had died many years before, and both of her children had moved away. However, Veronique's grandchild, Emmanuel Munjinga, is still a resident. He recounts his mother telling him about the night when her baby brother was killed by the J'ba Fofi. Veronique would die only 10 months after losing her son Albert, and Emmanuel's mother would marry a man from Kinshasa years later and leave the village, leaving Emmanuel himself the only surviving member of the family in the area. The villagers of Dakar still all swear to the reality of the J'ba Fofi, yet they say they have not encountered one in many years. Some of them attribute this simply to decades of deforestation and forest fires, destroying most of the J'ba Fofi's habitat. Most of them, however, simply say it was time for the devil to return to hell.